Octavia remains one of the most popular cars on our roads, but in fact most of the models we see are either slightly cheaper fleet cars or slightly more expensive private vehicles. And what happens if we select everything in the configurator? Oh, here's what happens. Welcome to the test of the facelifted Octavia 2.0 TSI 4x4 in a version that's caught up with the Superb in terms of price. If you're new to my channel, my name is Zeka. Let's get started. Thanks for watching. The comparison with the Superb came to my mind when I saw the price list for this car, 223,900 PLN, and to say that it comes close to the Superb at this price point, in this budget, is an understatement, because with this budget you can already get a Superb with the same engine, and even in the Lauren and Clement package, which you could say leaves little to be desired. And this car still lacks a bit, because look, we don't have a panoramic roof here. We also don't have 360-degree cameras, and there's no tow hitch either, so this car could be a little more expensive. I think you could configure the RSA for 250,000 zlotys. So it's natural that if a car gets so close in price to its more expensive sibling, it has to be comparable to it and has to compete with it. You also have to admit you could make the Superb more expensive by choosing unique pricey options like the interior or paint. You could also push its price up to around, I don't know, 300,000 zlotys. However, well, we have what we have, and we have a very expensive configuration, so naturally we want to compare it with a car you could get for the same money. The facelift of the Octavia was very subtle. Remember how the previous generation's facelift split the headlights in two? That design wasn't very popular. It seems that here the changes are more elegant. The lights have also changed slightly. The front has become a bit more similar to the Superb, especially because of the shape of the air intakes in the bumper and the new light signature. Second generation matrix LED headlights have also appeared with animated features and dynamic turn signals, and at the back, new light graphics. There are also new wheel designs and paint colors. So the changes on the outside are noticeable, but well, it's not just cosmetic. As for the powertrain, the 3-cylinder 1.0 has disappeared from the lineup, but instead there's now a 4-cylinder 1.5 TSI. Actually, it was already available before in the 150 horsepower version, but now there's also a 115 horsepower version. Whatever the reason, we're very happy about it. The 2-liter TSI and TDI engines are still available, and for those looking for sporty excitement, there's also the RS version, which in its new gasoline variant now has 265 horsepower, that's 20 more than before. The RS version still lacks all-wheel drive for the gasoline model, and I think I know why. You probably guessed it. Our test car is the 2.0 TSI after the facelift. It has slightly more power, now 204 horsepower plus all-wheel drive, automatic transmission, and acceleration to 100 km/h is just a bit better than before, at 6.8 seconds. At least in theory. I'll get to the practical part in a moment. Let's first explain what's actually included here that makes this car cost so much. Cognac design suite, luxury interior for 17,000, Highland green paint for 8,000, the largest driver assistance package. With a bigger screen, navigation and semi-autonomous driving, 10,000. Additionally, Canton audio system, heated windshield or zoned climate control, sound absorbing front windows and tinted rear ones, heated steering wheel, rear airbags or pre-crash system. There's also the option to connect the Vitor dashcam to the USB-C port located in the mirror, exactly like it is in the Superb. Since we're discussing the Superb, I'll begin with the Octavia's advantages. I think the Octavia's cockpit design is sometimes more visually interesting than the Superb's. For example, take a look at the digital gauges. In the Octavia, they're nicely integrated into the cockpit and don't look like a screen that's been forcefully stuck on, as is the case with its larger sibling. And if I were to praise both cars, I really appreciate that the largest multimedia screens have a maximum diagonal of 13 inches. In my opinion, those 15-inch and larger screens are basically just unnecessary TVs. And if I were to praise only the Superb, well, it's the only one that has smart dials. Octavia doesn't offer such luxuries, and you have to set the temperature here on the screen. and the materials around here are also a bit worse. With the facelift, a new LoRa also appeared in the Octavia, which is a virtual assistant now integrated with ChatGPT. We also have USB-C ports, each with 45 watts. The charger cools the phone during charging, and they've improved the suite of driver assistance systems, including the semi-autonomous driving option I mentioned earlier. So even though the Superb remains higher in the hierarchy, the Octavia has gained gadgets that it previously lacked. My dear friends, the sponsor of this episode is Wehis PL, which is a car platform where more than 10,000 new and used cars are available. The platform cooperates with dealers of all brands, from the popular ones, like in this case, to the most expensive ones. That's also a bit like in this case. With the code ZAHAR-OFF, you'll get an additional 1% discount on Wehis PL, which in this case is over 2,000 zlotys, on top of the discounts visible on the website. At Wehis, you can choose a car, calculate your installment, get a financial decision, and sign the contract 100% online. Or if you prefer a traditional conversation, you can also do it with an advisor. Check the description where you'll find a link to thousands of cars you can lease. I've discussed the interior design, so let's move on to the interior finish. And so the top of the dashboard is finished with fantastic material along its entire length and width. Lower down we move to one part of this cognac trim package, where under the leather, unfortunately, we don't have even a bit of foam here, so it's hard to the touch. Then we move on to the trim, which doesn't really look expensive and probably isn't. It moves quite noticeably, even makes a bit of noise. It's some kind of tradition. I would say among the cars I've tested this year that if any part of the cockpit looks comfortable enough to lean on, and honestly, if you try to manipulate something on the screen, it will definitely either move or creak, and this one has the potential to do both. Even lower, there's a surprise as we go down still. Look at how soft this material is. You can really sink your finger in by a centimeter. That's how it looks across the width, only changing lower down. We're going down to a more standard hard plastic panel, which could stop being hard plastic right here in this spot, because sometimes we rest our knee here. But okay, we can't have everything. The pockets are flocked, as you can see, well thought out in terms of shape, and now we move on to the compartments. Look at this, a tiny compartment, just a piece of plastic, and what? Nice finish inside. Well, you rarely see things like this, even in premium brands. Moving on, a place to charge your phone. Here we have two USB-C ports. Notice that it's actually over there. You can't see it that well, but there's a gap there, and that's where the cool air comes from, so it's cooled. Let's move on. Here we have some trays for small items, and here we have two cup holders. And honestly, not too big. The armrest compartment, and finally, a nicely finished glove compartment in front of the passenger. I'll also mention
the comfortable armrests, or actually the armrest.
On the right side, and yes, on the left, well, I've seen better. I mean, here we have a bit of foam, but underneath I can feel that I'm hitting the hard structure. And I haven't even mentioned the doors yet. Here we have just a few millimeters of foam, here plastic, and here something that's supposed to look like aluminum. And the upper part of the door is finished with something that gives a little under your finger, so there's nothing to complain about here either. And that's how it looks from the driver's perspective. And since we're talking about the driver's perspective, I'll also mention visibility. Here the A-pillars aren't too thick, so they don't block visibility. The side mirrors are rather on the smaller side, but they don't blend in with the A-pillars, so visibility here isn't bad either. Notice that I'm sitting almost right under the rear view mirror, which isn't very big, so it doesn't block our visibility either. Well, I'm able to observe everything around me quite well without slouching too much, without any obstructions, not to mention what's happening behind me. Even the B-pillar there, as you can see, isn't very thick. Ladies and gentlemen, we're basically sitting in an aquarium. In this respect, it's good. You could even say it's excellent. We can also put it in reverse to see the different possibilities, different options here and here. Notice that even though we have a pretty well-equipped car, the only camera we have on board here is the one in the back. And this is what it looks like when it comes to nighttime lighting. So we have LED strips here set to green, and we have footwell lighting here in a different shade, kind of purple. and everything here checks out. We have one strip in the middle plus strips like these on the doors. That covers the doors. The handles and pockets aren't illuminated, but the door buttons are. And yes, here on the console, all the buttons are illuminated, just like on the steering wheel, everything is nicely lit. Let's take a look in the glove compartment, which is also illuminated. This small compartment under the armrest isn't lit, but that's fine since nothing really fits in it anyway. Here we also have lighting. We also have lighting for the phone compartment, and that's basically it. It's time for the 2-meter driver test, and with 4 fingers of space above my head, the Octavia performs well. We're nearing the width of the Superb. It's not quite there yet, but it's already impressive. We can lower the seat really low, which is that's why there's this much headroom. The position relative to the steering wheel is right, and we can adjust the steering wheel here as well. Oh, in such an impressive range, so it's easy to find a comfortable position in this car. What I could complain about is the shape of the console, because while I have enough space in front of my left knee on the right side, the protruding section with buttons and air vents means I don't have as much space for my right knee. But we're talking about extra space here because I have exactly as much as I need, and that's me sitting behind my own driving position. Well, I have to refer again to the Superb, where I would definitely have much more space. That doesn't mean I have little space here, it's just right. My knees are already just barely touching the driver's seat, but it's soft and cozy, so I won't complain either. There's still a minimal amount of headroom and also some space for my feet. Maybe nothing crazy, but I'm not forcing my feet under the seat, so let's say it passes the 2-meter test. Maybe nothing wild in the back, but definitely solid. However, when it comes to luxuries in the back seat, I'll tell you what isn't a luxury up front. The finish on the upper part of the door isn't super soft, but it does give a little when you press it with your finger. Here we have completely hard plastic, but they didn't skimp on the door pockets because up front the pockets are nicely finished, and in the back they're flocked as well. We expected air vents in the center or on the B-pillars in the back, but they're missing. We have a large pocket behind the seat, a small pocket for a phone, as I mentioned, a third climate control zone, heated outer seats, and 2 USB-C ports. And there's that typical VW center tunnel, which might make longer trips a bit uncomfortable for the third person in the back. Besides that, there's a light above your head, various grab handles, accessories, everything is in its place. I'll just point out an interesting little cost-saving detail. Namely, we have mounting points here. Of course, there's also ISOFIX, and in different cars they're covered in various ways. Sometimes more convenient, sometimes less. Octavia approached this really cleverly. There are no covers at all, no covers, no problem. And I'll also show you the difference between the lower and upper headrest positions. And it's quite a lot, plus the headrest accessories. So let's say a good sleep package, I don't know what it's called in Skoda, I didn't check, but that's basically what it must be about. As for the armrest, we'll find out what it's like in a moment, but I want to point out that this is yet another car that saves on a piece of material or some kind of loop you could grab to open it. There's just no real way to get to it, so you have to wedge your fingers in between the 2 leather sections here. Shout out to all the girls who have long nails, and only then can we finally open the armrest. The armrest is soft and comfortable, plus there's a really nice cup holder mechanism. We also have a passageway for skis. This is such a luxurious interior for 17 grand that it has to show its leather, it has to creak, because that's a very expensive kind of creaking. I'm being a bit sarcastic, of course, but that's it. And now the pride of the Octavia, which is the trunk. Exactly, the capacity of this trunk is 640 liters. In the station wagon, that's 40 liters more than in the liftback version. However, after folding the seats, we have 1,700 liters here, so for a car that is declared by Skoda as a compact, that's a really impressive number. But it's really not just about the liters, it's also about what else we find here, meaning the equipment and how well thought out this whole trunk is. Look, we have a cover on rails here, we have retractable hooks, we have all kinds of conveniences whichever way you look at it, and we even have levers that let us fold down the rear seat backs. And that's how we get that larger capacity. However, notice that we have a slight threshold here, and the trunk floor you see now can't be adjusted to a higher level to get rid of that threshold. Well, let's say that if someone ever needs it, that's the first downside. Besides that, in the middle we see these fantastic Skoda inventions, which are cargo holders you can place anywhere so your luggage doesn't slide around in the corners. But that's not all when it comes to positive good surprises. We look under the trunk floor and there we see a spare wheel. This is another proof that we have a well-equipped version here. And if that wasn't enough good news, after removing these plastic, let's say, barriers that separate the main part of the trunk from the compartments on the right and left side, it turns out that right by the loading threshold there's actually a perfect spot to put the cover. So after removing the cover, we don't have to leave it in the garage. I won't say too much, I'm talking about the driving impressions of this car, because not much has changed here. Of course, a few more horsepower have been added. Of course, it shaved off a tenth or two of a second there. Or maybe it didn't shave off any time, because the measurements showed that going below 7 seconds is actually quite difficult. So taking that into account, I wouldn't look for any clear evidence during this test drive that we have those extra dozen or so horsepower and that it's going to drive much better. It's a car that delivers the same level of excitement as the pre-facelift version. The steering system is probably the same. The gearbox works like the DSG in the Octavia. And basically, if I had to focus on one thing, something that I don't completely like, is this certain discrepancy between the expectations for how fast it starts from zero and how the car actually starts. Floor it. Oh, and the car doesn't really start accelerating until after the first second. The standard mode is pretty sluggish and the sport mode is only a little better. In this respect, when I was measuring this car's 0 to 100 acceleration after the third measurement, I stopped believing I could get below 7 seconds. That's because it basically wastes the first second. So these are really, really slow, unhurried and calm starts, and I can guess why it had to be like that. Oh, just like now when I have such a gap. Come on, dash, 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 go. Exactly. Anyway, that's my observation about how it launches from a standstill, but it absolutely doesn't ruin the impression or, in my opinion, the overall opinion about this car. Because it's no coincidence that there are so many of them on our roads, since this car is neither too loud, nor of course accidentally too quiet, neither too slow nor obviously too fast, neither too beautiful nor too ugly. I would say it's just right for a lot of people, which is basically confirmed by how often we see it on the roads. And that's exactly how it feels to drive it. It's reasonably comfortable, reasonably fast, reasonably pleasant, reasonably unengaging, and you can feel some emotions, especially when the engine revs higher. Even the Moose test was like that. It almost succeeded, but at the end it started to sway and stabilize. And you can't really say it went badly, but you also can't say it went perfectly. So you could say that's the Octavia in a nutshell. Everyone was given an equal share, everything is just right and enough to enjoy it, so you won't be disappointed, but you also won't be telling your kids with excitement about how you used to drive it. Octavia. Let's go back to the prices once more. Octavia Essence, 108,000 Octavia. Selection from 125,000. Sportline from 140,000. RS from 167,000. And these prices sound much nicer than the 230,000 that I'm dealing with here. But I didn't mention those prices without a reason. You have to remember, it's VAG, so after selecting just a few options in the configurator, the prices go up by at least 10 plus thousand zlotys. And then we're back to the budget where the Superb reigns supreme. But to be fair, we have to admit that if we start configuring the Superb, the price can also go up to even 300,000 zlotys. In summary, the post-facelift Octavia isn't revolutionary, but it's gradually reaching a higher class. Size-wise, it's already there, and its equipment and options are catching up. Matrix LEDs, a more powerful RS version, digital features. These are changes that really increase the appeal of this car. The base versions are still a reasonable fleet option, but if we look at the top configurations, the facelifted Octavia more than ever deserves to be compared to its bigger brother. Of course, that doesn't mean it has caught up with it. If space, comfort and prestige matter, then I think the Superb will still be the better choice. Thank you very much for watching this episode. Remember to subscribe and see you in the next videos. Bye. And as always, thanks to TAC Warsaw Expo for providing the location to record this video. I jak zwykle podziękowania dla TAC Warsaw Expo za udostępnienie terenu do nagrania tego filmu.